Hello, dear children. Let us start with your supplementary today. So, if you see your supplementary, we are already done up till the chapter title is The Fight. So, the next chapter, which is titled is The Open Window. So, let us see what is this chapter all about. Okay, pay attention, listen to the class properly. So, here, this lesson tells us about Frampton Nuttall. So Frampton Nuttall was suffering from nervousness. Alright. Now he goes to a calm and quiet place in the countryside for treatment. And there he calls on a family friend. Now after reaching there, he met a 15-year-old girl named Vera. Now Vera, she was very calm and confident. She told Nuttall that her aunt, Mrs. Suppleton, would come downstairs soon. Now Nuttall's sister had told him that he would meet very few people in the countryside and he would feel very unhappy there and his condition would become worse than before. So she would give him letters of introductions to all the people she knew there, and some of them were really quite nice. Now this young girl, Vera, asked Nuttall if he knew many people there, okay, as Frampton has visited this countryside. Now he told her that he did not know anybody. In fact, his sister had visited the place about 4 years ago. That's what he conversed with the young girl, Vera. And he also says that she had given him letters of introduction to some of the people. After which, on being asked, he also told Vera that he knew only her aunt's name and address. That's all that he knows about Vera's aunt. Now, Vera told Nuttall that a tragedy had happened in the family about 3 years ago. And she pointed to a large glass window. It opened onto a lawn, okay, and then it was kept wide open even on an October afternoon. Now Nuttall asked the girl if that tragedy had something to do with the window. The girl told him that it concerned her aunt's husband and 2 brothers, as it so happened that they had gone out for shooting, and this happened exactly on this day 3 years ago. They went out through that window but never came back. It was because they were swallowed up by the wet spongy ground and their bodies were never recovered. Now the girl's aunt, Mrs. Suppleton, always thought that they would come back someday and they would come through that window along with their dog, as they used to do. And that is why the window was kept open every evening till it was dark. The aunt often told the girl how they went out. Sometimes Vera, Vera too, even she had a feeling that they would walk through that window. Now, as the conversation, the discussion, the talk, exchange of words was going on between this little young girl, Vera, and Mr. Frampton Nuttall, right at that moment, Mrs. Suppletons arrive. So, during this conversation, the story continues. Meanwhile, what happens? Mrs. Suppleton entered the room and apologized for coming late. She hoped that the open window did not bother Mr. Nuttall. She told him that her husband and brothers would come straight from shooting and they would enter the house through the open window. They had gone to shoot birds in the marsh, and so they would spoil the carpet as their shoes would be muddy. On listening to this, Mr. Nuttall reacted. How did he react? Mrs. Suppleton went on talking about the shooting, and the shortage of birds. But to Frampton Nuttall, it was completely a kind of an horrible. In fact, he tried to turn the talk to a less horrible topic, but he wasn't successful. Thus, the same topic of discussion continued. He knew that Mrs. Suppleton was giving him only a part of her attention, and her eyes were directed to the window and the lawn. Now, as after this, what happened? Suddenly, Mr. Nuttall remembered doctor's advice, as what his doctor had advised him, what was his purpose of coming down to the countryside. So, actually the doctor had advised Nuttall to take complete rest, and he should avoid any kind of mental excitement. He should also not do any exercise, which needs a kind of a great physical strength. So, Frampton Nuttall wrongly thought that the strangers were interested in his illness and weakness. But the truth was, Mrs. Suppleton was not much interested in what Nuttall was saying. In fact, she was in her own world. Suddenly, she looked towards the window and said with a cry that, they had come at last. They were in time for tea. They looked as if they were covered with mud. Listening to which, Frampton Nuttall trembled with fear. He turned towards the girl to express sympathy, but even the girl was looking through the window, and there was horror in her eyes. Now, Frampton had a feeling of a strange fear now. He swung round in his seat and he looked towards the window. And now it was already dusk, This, what is dusk? Dawn, dusk. Dawn, the early morning when the sun rises, dusk, the evening, the twilight when the sun sets, So now it was already dusk, and Nuttall saw 3 figures walking across the lawn towards the window. And all 3 of them carried guns. And one of them even had a white coat hung over his shoulders. And there was also a brown colored dog which followed them. Now, all of them, they came silently near the house, and one of them sang, You know what did this? You see, it's already within the double inverted commas. One of them sang, I say, Bertie, why do you bound? Now, to this, Nuttall suddenly he retreats, He took his stick and coat. He walked through the hall door and along the pathway, and he reached the front gate. Somehow he made a kind of a hasty retreat, you can say that. And there a cyclist had to run into the hedge to avoid collision with him. As because I told you he was in a haste, he somehow escaped in hurry. So he was just about to collide with a cyclist. Now, those figures, remember as I told you just a couple of minutes back, some 3 figures followed by a brown colored dog, right? Now the figure with the raincoat came in through the window and he asked who was the man who had rushed out of the house. Mrs. Stapleton told him that he was one Mr. Nuttall. He was an extraordinary man. He could talk only about his illness. And he went away without a word of goodbye or a kind of an apology. It appeared as if, he had seen a ghost. In addition to which, the girl also explained, the young girl, Vera, remember? The girl explained that Nuttall rushed out of the house because he was afraid of the dog. He had told the girl that he was terribly afraid of dogs. And she also gives a reason that why Nuttall was afraid of dog. She says that once a group of dogs chased him into a graveyard and he had to spend the night in a newly dug grave. As because the dogs were growling all around him. And with this, if you see the text, the chapter comes to an end. This is what it means, the open window. An interesting story, right? A story full of thrill, excitement. Correct? I hope you understood my explanation. Please read the text. Go through the chapter. Reading the text is very important. Okay? As it will also help you to improve your language. And in case if you have any doubt, you can get back to me.